Hello, everybody, and welcome to 13th Take. This is the topic where we talk about all of the hottest hitting subjects in the world of sports, and that is why today, myself, Daniel Galvan, and my co-host, Nathaniel Puente, are going to figure out who was the best team in the 1977 NFL season.
Yeah, I mean, the easy thing to do would be to look back at who the Super Bowl winner was. But as we know, the NFL is just scripted anyway. And everything that they do didn't really matter, right? I mean, I think, back then they only had like 4 teams make the playoffs from each conference. And now it's like half the league makes the conference. So what would have happened if all these other extra teams had actually made it? And I think, like you said, this is the hard-hitting, hot off the press kind of stuff. This is the people that I know people stay up all night, late at night, thinking about because, who would have won the Super Bowl in 1977 if it wasn't the Cowboys versus the Broncos? What if it was the Raiders versus the Eagles? Who would have won it? I know that it is a thing that rambles my brain day in, day out, and that is why I fell off a stool a few days ago and spent half a day in a hospital. But when I approached you with this topic, there are things. I'm glad that over the last couple months that we've just been sharing like random nonsense with each other, because before, like, I would think these things, I'd write it down. I'd often tell my significant other sometimes what I would write, and being that she watches -3 sports, she would look at me like I was insane, and there was no one else I could share this with, because anyone else, even if you told another like actual modern age sports fan this kind of thing, they would still be like, I do not care. But thankfully, I told you this scenario that I had of putting hypothetical teams against each other in a hypothetical Super Bowl matchup, and you were like, yeah. At first I told you, let's just do the playoff teams who made it, and you were like, no, let's do literally every team in the league. So
I was like, let's do every sport that's ever existed. I don't even know how to explain this concept. The biggest issue with the podcast viewership is I think the 2 people who would be most interested in this podcast are the ones hosting it. Yeah. So I don't think anyone's going to be interested in it. But it doesn't matter, because we're just here to do random stuff that we want to do. And that's how it
I'm
works.
sure there's definitely a corner of the world that is interested in this kind of stuff, and we're here to deliver it to them. And I guess without further ado, we should get started.
Well, we have to explain the concept first, because no one knows what we're doing. Obviously, like, some people watch sports for sports, but obviously me and you watch it for what's important, debating. I just watch First Take. I don't even watch the ball games. But this concept is really stupid. Basically, me and Nate are going to spend a week doing a deep dive on a random NFL year. Not crazy amount of research. Just we have some free time. We'll spend an hour on YouTube or read an article. And then just, no pressure. But at the end of the week or the beginning of the week, we'll debate. And the way it's going to work is Nate is going to provide us with the teams. For instance, he'll provide me with 2 random teams, and then I will provide a case for each of those teams. I'll have a 2-minute time limit, and Nate will then respond on who he thinks was the better team, and we'll kind of alternate until we crown, finally, a 1977 Super Bowl champion.
Yeah, it should be great. And we started with 1977, of course, not for any particular reason. I spun a wheel a week or 2 ago, and we decided, okay, that's the first year we do. I'm a little heartbroken that it's that year, because as a Dallas Cowboys fan, there's only 5 years that I can look to, that I'm still holding on to faith to, that we happen to win a championship in. So, to know I have to argue against them maybe at some point is actually going to tear at my heart. But we'll see what happens.
Who knows? You might be right on the Cowboys the entire time. It's all about luck. So, Nate, I'll let you do the honors. Give me my first 2 teams, and I'll start things off.
Yeah, I'll get this wheel going, and we will get this show on the road. Who the heck knows how long this is going to take, but we will figure it out. Okay, So 28 teams, of course. There were 4 teams not in the NFL at the time in 1977. So we're going to spin this wheel and see what the first team that Dan gets is. First team you will get to argue for is the Philadelphia Eagles. Sure enough. So that will be your first team. We'll remove them from the list, and we will spin for the second team. And we will figure out how this would work out. And you will get the Raiders, the Oakland Raiders they were in 1977. Now, of course, they're the Las Vegas Raiders, which I think is fitting because I believe you're in Las Vegas at the moment.
I am in Las Vegas, so just to set things up before I talk, in the 1977 season, the Philadelphia Eagles had a 5-9 record, Nathaniel, and the Oakland Raiders had an 11-3 record. They actually did make it to the postseason. They won one postseason game over the 2-seed Baltimore Colts, only to lose to the Orange Crush Denver Broncos defense. So, let's get it started. I got 2 minutes. And by the way, these are my note cards. Some of them only have 2 lines. Some of them have much more. And let's start with the Philadelphia Eagles. So the Eagles, you know who their quarterback was, Nate? It was the one and only Ron Jaworski. And I got to be honest with you, he was actually kind of good. You know, when I think of Ron Jaworski, I think about him on Monday Night Football, but he's actually the Polish Rifle. And, Jaws was damn good as a quarterback, great head coach in Dick Vermeil. But what really made this team good was their defense. Yes, they may have a 5-9 record, but they are your stereotypical team that lost close games that they should have won. A lot of teams respected them. In fact, the eventual Super Bowl champions, Dallas Cowboys, only beat the Eagles 16-10, and 7 of those points came on a punt blocked for a return for a touchdown. So you can make the case that the Eagles were the best team in 1977. All right, so that was a minute. I'm just going to go a minute because I only have a minute worth of content on these teams.
Can I counter your Eagles? Because since I'm not going to get to talk about them. So one thing about them, they had Dick Vermeil as their coach. They also had their defensive coordinator was Marion Campbell, which I know in 1977 they weren't very good. But a couple of years later, they would actually go to the Super Bowl. It's actually very strange that you pulled up this matchup because the Raiders and Eagles actually played each other a couple years in a Super Bowl. Of course, the Raiders ended up winning that one. But kind of interesting, kind of cool. And yeah, this was like the growing nucleus of that team. So when you think about early 80s Eagles doing pretty good, this was the team. They were the first, I think, I don't know if I'm going to get this wrong, but the 1980 NFC Championship, they beat the Dallas Cowboys. It was the first of 3 or 4 straight NFC Championships that the Dallas Cowboys would lose with Danny White as their quarterback, which bums me out to this day considering I was born 17 years after these things happened, but I'm still upset about it. But yeah, so really, there's definitely some strength. I know they were 5-9, but it reminds me a little bit of the 2016 Eagles. They finished 7-9. The Dallas Cowboys were 13-3 that year and went to the playoffs, and then lost to the Packers because they can never get past the divisional round, kind of like your Houston Texans. But the Eagles, and I remember at the end of that year, the conversation was, oh, well, you better watch out for this team. And I thought, no way. But next year in 2017, the Eagles go on this great run with Nick Foles, second half of the year, and end up winning their first Super Bowl. So interesting story about the 77 Eagles there.
And it kind of shows you, you kind of see some things that were doing well, like their defense. If you look at the stats on Football Reference, they have very basic stats that analyze offense and defense, and they just call it SRS, which is that's just what they call it. If it's a positive, it's above average. If it's negative, it's below average. And they had a plus 1.9 defensive SRS, which is higher than any team with a sub 500 record. So this was a team that obviously was doing some things well. It just it wasn't their year. Oakland Raiders. So first and foremost, they were just better. I mean, they made the postseason, but they were guided by one hell of a quarterback as well, and a guy who was a better quarterback in Ken Stabler. An incredibly talented quarterback who, yes, did turn the ball over quite a bit, but He scored a lot of touchdowns. One of the better offenses in the league this year. And a big reason why wasn't just the quarterback, but their top running back, Mark Van Egan. He had 1,273 rushing yards on the season. One of the best running backs / fullbacks you never really think about. Defensively, they were okay. But offensively, it was all about the running back, all about the quarterback, and of course, Fred Biletnikoff. Between these two teams, Nathaniel, I think it's safe to say it's up to you to decide who you think was better.
Yeah, I think based on your argument, it's hard to really go against the Raiders. I mean, this is John Madden you're talking about. I mean, one of the winningest coaches percentage-wise in NFL history. I mean, the Raiders, the 70s Raiders, that's like such a absolutely classic team. I mean, I think of the most dynamic teams in NFL history, like 70s Raiders have to be up there. And so, yeah, sorry to the Eagles. Like I said, they have a big nucleus and a good starting point, and once we get to that 1980 season and 1981 season, they will definitely be ones to look out for, but at this point, it definitely has to go to the Raiders.
So the first of 14 teams advancing to the next round is the Raiders. Nathaniel, why don't you pick your two teams?
Sure, I will do that right now, but I'm also writing this, handwriting this on paper to track these things.
I got it down too.
Cool. I'm glad we're both writing it down because there will definitely be a point where one of us either does something wrong of writing one word on a piece of paper. All right, let's see who I will get to defend at this point. I will get the Denver Broncos. How about that?
Oh my gosh, look at you.
the Red Miller led Broncos who went to the Super Bowl this season. So we'll see who they get to go up against. It would be so crazy if I get the Cowboys. I get their
that'd be crazy.
Divisional rival, the Chargers, who of course were in San Diego at this point. So we've already taken 3 of the AFC West teams at this point. Kind of crazy. We're really starting in that direction. So 1977. I guess I will start with the Chargers, the underdogs of this story. The Chargers finished the 1977 season fittingly with a 7-7 record. One of the slower offenses in the NFL at this time. Their defense was definitely their strong suit. They ranked 6th in terms of points per game allowed. But one thing about the Chargers I think is strong, and again, kind of like the Eagles, how they were really building towards something a lot bigger. The Chargers had a guy on their team named Dan Fouts. Maybe you've heard of him. Another sort of like Ron Jaworski, spent some time on Monday Night Football later in his life. But before then, in the 1980s, and I know we're talking about 1977 here, but Dan Fouts sets so many NFL records, of course, that have been broken by in modern day where passing is just the way the game is. But in the 1980s, with Dan Fouts, with his coach Don Coryell, just absolutely annihilated the record books and was an absolutely dynamic passer. They never reached a Super Bowl. They never had much playoff success, but still, I mean, he's a Hall of Fame quarterback. So you gotta give him his due. He definitely was here. He only started 4 games in this season. They had a guy named James Harris starting who bounced around the league a bit. Spent some time with the Rams and spent some time with the Bills before this. Was one of the first black quarterbacks who found some success in the NFL. And here at the tail end of his career was with the Chargers. But this team did not win a ton, but their defense was good, and I think they had a strong suit in that category.
Look, I'm not going to say Nate is racist. I'm not going to say you're racist. But James Harris was the first black quarterback to ever be a starter in the National Football League. He starts the majority of the games for the Chargers. And Nate comes in talking about Mr. Dan Fouts, who only played 4 games, shitting on the legacy of James Harris. Nathaniel, You are a part of the problem. You know, Shaq Harris, I'm watching these highlights. He's amazing. Some of the great explosive plays. This was a team that lived and died by the explosive play. And the fact that you're talking about the 1977 Chargers and you're disrespecting history, Nate, you're getting soft canceled.
Well, I'm going to throw out one stat for you that might crash down this house of cards you're building for James Harris. He threw 5 touchdowns to 11 interceptions that season. Only completed 51.7% of his passes. Meanwhile, Dan Fouts completed 63% of his passes, which by this standard in 1977 is pretty good. He also did not throw too many touchdowns, only 4 to 6 interceptions, so not a great ratio there either. So definitely I think this team just wasn't built to win at the moment. Also, their running game, Ricky Young was their leading rusher. He only had 543 yards throughout the whole season. So, yeah, there's the Chargers. I think if there was an expanded playoffs, sort of like how you brought up with the Eagles, a lot of close losses here. Their last game of the year was a 10-9 loss to the Steelers. They lost some other one-possession games. They lost 17-14, actually, to the Broncos at home earlier in the year. And how did their other game against the Broncos go? Okay, they lost that one by 8 points. So 2 possessions there in the 70s. So, yeah, I guess that's really all I got to say about the Chargers. 7-17.
How about the Broncos? How about the Broncos?
Well, there really isn't a lot that needs to be said about the 1977 Broncos. As you mentioned, the Orange Crush defense, one of the more dynamic defenses of the decade. It's unfortunate for them that the Pittsburgh Steelers were also so amazing and the Oakland Raiders were also so amazing, because those two teams definitely dominated the decade in the conference. But the Broncos got this 1 year to shine, and they made it work. They got themselves all the way to the Super Bowl. They pulled off this dynamic upset over the Oakland Raiders. Of course, the Broncos were 12-2 that season, so they did win their division. This is one of the few times in the period when the Raiders were dominant that the Broncos did actually win the division. So solid work by them. They have an SRS of 11.3, which is the stat that you brought up earlier. They were actually first in the entire league in that number. So this was a team built to win, and they pulled it off pretty well. They're in Mile High Stadium. They led the league in rushing. They had a dynamic rushing defense, that is. Just one of the better rushing defensive units. Their offense left a little to be desired. They had Craig Morton, who, unlike the Chargers, had a positive touchdown interception ratio, 14-8. He threw for only 1,900 yards, which for 1977 isn't terrible, but isn't anything to really write off. Of course, Craig Morton actually finished second in MVP voting this season, believe it or not, even though not the greatest year. But Broncos, I think, definitely are the I mean, they're literally the conference winner. Like, you gotta give them their flowers. They beat the Raiders, who you debated for just a bit ago, in the AFC conference game. They beat the Steelers, so they beat literally the two dynamic powerhouse teams of the decade in this one postseason. So, you know, they didn't get lucky that the Steelers lost to some other team in the first round and they got a cupcake opponent. No, they had to go and beat the best teams back to back. They did it at home, but they still did it. So, yeah, there's my take on the Broncos for now.
I think it's easy. I mean, this is cookie cutter. In the same conference, in the same division, Broncos were one of the best teams of the year. Give me the Broncos. All right, we got 2 teams, 12 left in the first round. Who are my 2 teams, Nathaniel? Spin that wheel.
I just realized I never stopped spinning the wheel when I was talking, so we just stared at the wheel for a whole time. But it's okay. All right, let's spin it for you.
See what we got.
We'll get the Miami Dolphins.
Okay, Miami Dolphins is one of them. Bob Greasy. And who's the other one?
Did you notice when you were looking through or watching old highlight tapes, they made a big deal about Bob Greasy wearing glasses in the season?
One of maybe week 3 or week 4, they profiled that, and I gotta be honest with you, he didn't look very cool. I did not think he did. Wow, we have an AFC East matchup. Okay.
You get the Dolphins and Patriots.
I can't even find my Patriots notes. All I know is their quarterback was like super mid. Oh man, this is rough. So for Miami Dolphins, all I have is quarterback Bob Greasy on my note card. And then let's see what would I have for the Patriots notes. Oh, I also have the name of the tight end. All right, I'm not even gonna look at the records. No cheating. Miami Dolphins. They have Bob Greasy. He's got phenomenal eyesight. You know, this is a guy who I believe spent his whole career not being able to see. High school, college, he couldn't make out anyone. A couple of years in the league, and then he finally got eyesight, and it just shows you a man who couldn't see with eyesight. This is clearly an unbeatable team. You know, when you think of Don Shula's Dolphins, this is where that undefeated run started. So the DNA of these great Dolphins teams, oh wow, they're 10-4 too. They're pretty good. So this is a good team actually. 4.4 offensive rating, 3.5 defensive rating. Pretty good team. As far as the New England Patriots, you know, they were led by Steve Grogan, who is the most average quarterback of all time. He's someone that you want to replace, but you feel good that you don't have a bad quarterback. But they have a great tight end in Russ Francis, who has a lot of great records. Great receiver in Darryl Stingley. His son is a corner for the Houston Texans. And I'm going to beg for you to pick the Patriots over the Dolphins. And the reason being is we have to stop going with these teams that have quote-unquote better records. So that's the case.
This is a very tough one because they are neck and neck records-wise. Like if we throw records out the books, I mean, how did they do in they split the season series. Of course, the home team won each of them. Very low-scoring affairs in both of these games. I think what, to me, I mean, it's just hard for me to write off the 70s Dolphins. I know I mentioned the Steelers and the Raiders earlier, because they kind of dominated the later half of the decade. The Steelers were good the whole decade. The Dolphins really were good in the early decade, and I think the year before this, the Dolphins had missed the playoffs for the first time in like years. It was kind of like how the Kansas City Chiefs were this year, 2025. And it was like this big, like, whoa, what's going on? But then they turned it around and rode the ship correctly and went 10-4. And this is what makes me so upset when I look at old NFL standings. Like, a 10-4 team missed the playoffs. Like, are you kidding me? Like, they definitely deserved a shot to have their hat in the ring and to compete for a title. But they didn't get it because you know, the rules were what they were. They only let 4 teams in from each conference. And so to me, it kind of has to be the Dolphins just because, I mean, I look at their scores and they dominated so many of the games that they played in. I mean, they beat the Cardinals on Thanksgiving 55-14, which is one of 2 times that the NFL, for some ridiculous reason, decided that the St. Louis Cardinals should host a Thanksgiving game instead of the Dallas Cowboys. But yeah, so I mean, the Patriots, really not a bad team. I mean, you don't think about any Patriots team before Tom Brady comes around of having any sort of relevance, but like they're pretty solid. They're a fullback named Sam Cunningham rushing for over 1,000 yards. They had another guy, Don Calhoun, rushing for 700 yards. So, and remember, this is a 14-game season. Steve Grogan, like you said, pretty average, but like for the day, dependable, right? So this is a hard one. I think if this game actually had gotten played in the playoffs, like it would have come down to a last possession. There would be a really stupid, controversial call everyone would complain about for a week, but I think the Dolphins would win that game.
All right, we will give it to Greasy and the Dolphins. They advance. They actually make the next round. It is crazy about their record being 10-4, which would be the second best record in the NFC, tied with the Rams. but even better than the Pittsburgh Steelers, who won their AFC Central at 9-5. All right, Nate, what are your two teams?
Let's see who I get. I get the Atlanta Falcons. Finally, we get some like we have been getting some like really good teams, and I'm glad we finally get to talk about some bad ones. We'll see who else I got. Hope it's like the Buccaneers or something.
The Falcons are such a one-sided team, by the way. They have nothing good on offense, but their D's actually good.
And the Rams.
Joe Namath and Pat. Yeah.
This was the year Joe Namath started for them. Or was he? Yeah, I guess I'll find out.
He started with them.
Awesome. So, Pro Football Reference thinks I'm a robot right now, so it's loading the website.
It's like who else could be looking up 1977?
I think one time I was trying to track UTRGV records, like about their men's basketball team, like. I forget what I was trying to look up, but I had looked at so many pages on the basketball reference website that it told me, like, you have clicked on too many websites. If you are an ESPN employee, like, please stop. You are not allowed to use this website or something like that.
That's crazy. It's like, come on. Who else is on Sports Reference?
All right. So we get two teams from the NFC West, which... I'm going to throw this out anytime that we're in pre-2002 football. But why the heck were the Atlanta Falcons in the Eastern Time Zone and the NFC West? Whoever thought of that, that's not a good idea. I cannot believe we're allowed to do that. Okay, so the 77 Falcons, a lot better than I thought they were. It looks like they had an absolute dynamic defense. They were the league-leading defense. I think the problem with the Falcons for a long portion of their early history was they did not have a quarterback worth a darn. They had Steve Bartkowski, who I think they drafted in 1975 with the first pick in the NFL draft, who they christened as he's going to be the savior of the franchise. He's going to push us to the next level. And he did a little later. They won a playoff game finally for like the first time in their team's history. But at this point, yeah, it's really not all clicking together. Is the team total 8 touchdowns to 16 interceptions. That is, they had literally double the number of interceptions that they did touchdowns, which 16 interceptions, really not a ton, especially even for the era. But when you have as double as many turnovers as you do touchdowns, that's probably a problem. On the rushing side of the ball, yeah, they're led by a guy named Haskell Standback, which, again, he's actually not the fullback. I was thinking, like, that is a fullback name, but no, he's the running back, and Woody Thompson is their fullback, allegedly. So 873 yards for him. Their defense, though, is really what stood up and was the leader of the team, and probably the reason that they won 7 of those games that they did. So they only get 2 Pro Bowlers actually on their team, one of whom is Roland Lawrence, a cornerback who led the league, I believe, or was up there in interceptions. He definitely led the team. He had 7 interceptions. And then they had a defensive end by the name of Claude Humphrey, who had 9.5 sacks, who made the Pro Bowl. So their defense was just pretty good for the time. Just going to read some stats of how they did. They led the league in pass yards allowed, so they allowed the fewest yards. They were 11th in rushing yards, so pretty good there. And, of course, in yards total, they allowed the second fewest yards, so their defense was pretty good. So if they happened to play a team that had a subpar offense, like, I think they could definitely go toe-to-toe and advance to the next round. Now, unfortunately, they're facing the Los Angeles Rams, who, as bad as the Falcons' offenses, it's about as good as the Rams' offense was. That was a very bad sentence. But the Rams were 4th in terms of points per game, and also 2nd in terms of defense per game. So the Rams were like definitely a powerhouse team. Again, in the late 70s, Rams were winning the division literally every year, year after year after year. They only made it to one Super Bowl, not this year, obviously, but a 10-4 team who made the playoffs. They rode a 6-game winning streak near the end of the season. Of course, lost the last game of the year, but really, really a good team. And against the Falcons, they actually split the series. They lost the opening game to them 17-6, and then later at home won 23-7. So if these two teams met, I think it would. I guess it's up to you to figure it out, but I guess I'm not done with the Rams here, the Los Angeles Rams, led by a guy named Pat Hayden. They also had Joe Namath, as you said, in his final year, I believe, in the league. So a pretty solid offensive unit. They had Vince Ferragamo, who later would play in a Super Bowl for them, I think, in 1979. Really hazy on the details at the moment. But Lawrence McCutcheon, definitely a guy I've heard of. 1,200 yards here in this 14-game season. Made the Pro Bowl. I think probably deserved to get some MVP votes or definitely get on the All-Pro team. But probably a guy named Walter Payton kind of shot that down. But solid runner in his own regard in the 70s for the Rams. Billy Waddy finished third in offensive Rookie of the Year voting. So, a pretty good offense, and their defense definitely was a solid team too. They had, Jack Youngblood, a Hall of Fame player on their team at this time. You can definitely tell that I'm reading up on this team as I'm speaking about them, but that's okay. I think again, like I wish I could get one where the differences weren't there wasn't such a disparity, but it's definitely, for me, I know who I would pick, but if you had to choose one, who do you think you would go with?
Well, we'll get there. I mean, all the good teams that are advancing, they got to face each other in the next round, and I'm glad you talked about the the Falcons, because this is a damn good defense that's gone way forgotten because their offense was awful. It's defensively, their statistics are only usurped by the Denver Broncos Orange Crush defense, and that's it. The number 2 defense in 1977 was the Dirty Bird Atlanta Falcons. The offense let them down. That's just what happened, and you can't pick them against the Rams right here. You look at the stats, and the Rams were just very good at both offense and defense. The quarterback that won the job after Namath either got hurt or lost the job, Pat Hayden, he ended up becoming the athletic director at USC, but he was good enough to get them to the playoffs and good enough for them to beat the Falcons in this hypothetical matchup. All right, next 2 teams, what do we got? I feel lucky. I think I'm going to get the Cowboys here.
We have to get some pretty bad teams at some point, and that's what I'm looking forward to. This is like when the FA Cup rolls around and you get some like League 2 teams like Plymouth Argyle against Westertrilland or something.
Yeah, I hope one of them gets an easy roadmap to like the Final Four.
Can only hope.
That's all I want.
Vikings, man, we're getting all the playoff teams.
I know, another good team.
Okay.
I hope I get the Cowboys next. It'd be good to get one of these 2 eliminated.
The Jets. Oh my goodness.
All right. This one's a no-brainer. The Vikings are better than the Jets. You go and you watch the highlights, and the narrator's talking shit about the Jets. Literally. In 1977. As if they've been bad forever and will continue to be bad. And he was quite prophetic. This year they were 3-11. There were so many miscues. So much awfulness. I don't know if the Jets and the Vikings played, but I do know the Vikings would have destroyed them had they played. The Vikings are a very interesting team where they got a lot of wins, but their statistical profile isn't great. They have a guy in Fran Tarkenton who is a great legendary quarterback, this year offensively, he wasn't firing in all cylinders, and they kind of relied on the defense to pull them through. But their defense was also very average. The Jets were just one of the worst teams in the league. Their quarterback was Richard Todd. How they got 3 wins is beyond me. They have a guy named Klecko who Donald Trump pardoned. But the Vikings are clearly the better team than the Jets. And surprisingly, the Jets weren't the worst team in the league. Hopefully you get them next. But who's going to advance? Are you going to go with the Jets or the Vikings?
God, it would absolutely ruin our entire purpose of doing this if I picked the Jets. But when I'm looking at the Vikings, they're really not as impressive as I would have thought they were in this season. You mentioned Fran Tarkenton, and I look at his stats, 9 touchdowns to 14 interceptions. He's 37 years old. He's definitely at the end of his line of his amazing Hall of Fame career. But, really not that impressive a team. They have Chuck Foreman carrying the ball for them. Definitely a great team here, but not really as dynamic. They lost the game to the Cardinals. They lost the game to the Bears. They lost the game to the Raiders. So they really lost to upper opponents. They lost their first game of the year to the Cowboys and ended up losing the conference championship game to the Cowboys. I don't think the Vikings are that impressive. Now, I wish they had faced a team that had missed the playoffs that I would have been able to be like, you know what? If this team had made the playoffs, they would have beaten them. But unfortunately, they got faced up against the Jets, who, whether it's 1977 or whether it's 2026, the Jets are just an absolute embarrassment. And, there's really no way to defend them at any point. They were worst in the league in passing touchdowns. They were very near the bottom of the league in rushing yards. They were worst in the league in passing yards. These are defensive wise, by the way. Has to be the Vikings, sadly.
All right. So who are your 2 teams for the next? I hope you get the Cowboys. If I get the Cowboys, if you get the Cowboys, I'm going to vote against them. If they get matched up with somebody's shit,
I will be fair. I will be fair.
All right. I'll be fair then. Because I will say the Cowboys are legitimately good. It's going to be hard to top them.
The Green Bay Packers.
Okay.
This is one of the teams I actually did a bit of research on, so I will share a little bit of that. And who will they face up against? The Seattle Seahawks. Here we go. We got 2 horrible teams. I am so excited about this. Don't have a ton of research on the Seahawks, but we'll see where this goes. The 1977 Green Bay Packers. They were one of the worst teams in the NFL on paper. All right? And I guess we don't have anything else to base this off other than paper. 4-10. They had Bart Starr as their coach, who just 10 years before this won his 2nd Super Bowl. In Super Bowl II, he was the only quarterback to win a Super Bowl at that point. But 10 years later, things are not looking good for old Bart. He has his offense as the 2nd worst offense in the league. And they're only the 2nd worst because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers exist. And they are 26th of 28 teams in SRS. They are absolutely pitiful. They were shut out in a game 1 week after they shut out a team. Of course, that being the Buccaneers. They beat them 13-0, one of their only 4 wins this season. But the next week, they lost 26-0 to the Bears, who made the playoffs as a wild card team. Just an absolutely abysmal team. They had Lynn Dickey leading them, who, when you think of the 70s Packers, he's kind of the guy that they would go to for quite a while. Bart Starr was really committed to him, but it just never worked out. They also had a guy named David Whitehurst, who is the father, I think, I don't want to actually not say this correctly, I'm pretty sure he's the father of Charlie Whitehurst. Who,
wow.
If you know,
that's gonna mean nothing to nobody in 5 years once everyone's aged out.
He is the father of Charlie Whitehurst. Are you familiar? I'm sure you know who Charlie Whitehurst is.
Yes, the backup quarterback for the Seahawks.
Clipboard Jesus.
Clipboard Jesus, yeah.
Yeah, this Packers team, absolutely horrible. I do want to bring up their kicker, actually, Chester Markle, who scored a touchdown, not in this season, but in 1980, he scored a touchdown after a kick was blocked. He recovered it and ran into the end zone in an overtime game, and they beat the Bears 13-6.
That's insane.
And he said he was high on cocaine that game, and he was high on cocaine most of his career. This is a kicker, by the way, from Poland, who, he has a crazy story. I think we need to do a whole podcast episode on him, honestly. But this 1977 Packers team, without a doubt, one of the worst teams, I think, in Green Bay Packers history. They went 3 weeks without scoring more than 10 points. They lost all 3 of those games to the Rams, Washington, and then Minnesota. They beat the Lions by just a single point. All of their wins were, other than the one over the Buccaneers, which, of course, Buccaneers were absolutely horrid at this point. All of their wins were by 4 points or fewer. So there was a very close chance of them going completely 0-14. Just hands down one of the worst teams in the NFL this year, and one of my favorite years in Green Bay Packers history, personally. I honestly forgot all of the research I did about them, but I remember they had a quarterback who they had in the preseason. They played 6 preseason games, and they were really excited about their performance in those, but didn't work out. The 1977 Seahawks, meanwhile, this is their second year in existence, coming off a year where they went 2-12 in their first year. They played the first year in the NFC, and then from 1977 to 2001, they played in the AFC. So, of course, now the Seahawks are in the NFC and just won the Super Bowl. But at this point, they're in the AFC. They have the worst defense in the league. They allowed 26 points per game, 26.6 points per game, which is the worst mark in the league. They are absolutely pretty bad on the defensive side of things, but they do have kind of a rising star in the offensive game. They have a guy by the name of Jim Zorn, who was cut from the Dallas Cowboys team after their preseason, and the Seahawks picked him up and gave him an opportunity to shine and make a name for himself, and he later does, definitely in the late 70s and the early 80s for the Seattle Seahawks. Jim Zorn, you might remember, was a horrible coach with the Washington team in the late 2000s, early 2010s. But at this point, life is still good for him. He's young, 24 years old, and he leads the Seahawks to 4 wins in his 10 starts. And he's pretty good quarterback, and there are signs of good things to come. But like I said, their defense is just absolutely pitiful. They gave up 42 points to the Cincinnati Bengals in the second week of the season. They get shut out 31-0 to the Patriots in week 4. They lose 44-7 to the Raiders, who are one of the better teams in the NFL. But one game that really freaks me out, and it is one of the strangest games, I think, scoreline-wise, when you think about everything involved with all of this, is the Seahawks actually beat the Bills 56-17 in Week 7. And, just one of the... They were actually had 49-3 at one point, and then the Bills' fetal comeback attempt fails. But, it's a very, very silly, lopsided game. And I think if the Seahawks played the Packers, the scoreline would look kind of similar to this. I think the Seahawks would manhandle them. They would be a pretty good feel-good story if this tournament was a real-life thing and the Packers had to play the Seahawks in the playoffs. I think the Seahawks would definitely come away with this one. But what do you think? I think you're muted, by the way.
Sorry, that was my opinion. No, you made a great case. I mean, this was the first time we actually had 2 teams where it could go either way. One 5-9, one 4-10. One was really bad on offense. One was really bad on defense. The difference is simple. Seattle was just slightly good on offense, and the Packers were just average on defense, and that's the difference. Another key player on that Seahawks team is Steve Largent, great receiver. I love the story about the kicker doing cocaine. I can't wait to hear more about that as we, do this podcast. You made a great case, and I'm all aboard Seattle advancing. Who do I got now?
Well said. Okay. Spin the wheel.
16 teams left.
You get the Houston Oilers.
Oh my gosh, why does it have to say Tennessee Titans on there, you asshole? Alright, what's the other one?
Ooh, that's close. What's it? Oh, give you the Lions, not the Cowboys.
Alright, that's the only fair thing to do. That would have been heartbreaking for you to decide. Alright, so the Detroit Lions, let me pull up my note card on them. But first I'll do the Oilers. Oilers, good team. They didn't make the playoffs. They were very close, 8-6. The whole way through, man, I look at this Oilers team and I see a good offense, is how I see it, and a decent defense. It was slightly above average. Great quarterback in Dan Pastorini, never an elite guy, but always a guy you were happy to have on your team. And the star of the team was Billy White Shoes Johnson, who's one of the great returners, kick returners, punt returners of all time. Phenomenal celebrations, always wore white shoes, and every other NFL week recap, I would see him return a big ball for a touchdown. This was just a solid Oilers team. They weren't one of the favorites to win the Super Bowl, but they were competitive. They were on the verge of making it to the postseason, and they ultimately didn't do that. As far as the Detroit Lions, I'm still looking for my notes here, Nathaniel.
Before you I'll let you go kind of find time to get your notes on the Lions, because I have two games that the Oilers played in 1977 that I want to highlight that are games I can't really believe happened. So I don't know if you got to watch week 2 of the NFL highlights. I would hope that your research at least got you to the second week of the NFL season.
Yeah.
But in the second week of the season, the Oilers play the Packers. Both teams are 1-0 coming into this. They both won their opening game. They both, even though the Packers go on to finish 4-10 are terrible, they both have faith in their year. And they play this absolutely sluggish game where neither of them can find the end zone, neither of them can score. There's a lot of turnovers, but on the Packers side, that is, the Packers turn the ball over 4 times, but the Oilers are just not able to punch it in. Like, something always happens. They miss a field goal here and there. And the game is tied 10-10 at the end of the game, near the end of the game. And in the fourth quarter, the Packers are driving. Good old Lynn Dickey has the Oilers. He's thrown 3 interceptions, but he's thrown 2 interceptions at this point, and he has the opportunity to get a score, at the very least a field goal. There's I think only 20 seconds or 30 seconds left of the game at this point. But he throws a pass, and it tips off of a defender, and it's caught by Willie Alexander of the Houston Oilers, who returns it 95 yards for a touchdown, and the Oilers end up winning the game because there's no time left. So one of the crazier finishes to an NFL game that I've ever seen. It's a game that is completely wiped from memory because it happened in 1977 and it didn't feature any dynamic players in it, but absolutely chaotic end to a game. But another chaotic end to a game came in later in the season, in week 7. The Oilers played the Bengals, and the crazy thing about this game is, you think of NFL players and you think of 70s NFL players, you think toughness, right? I know it's a cliche, and I know it's something that boomers or whoever likes to be like, oh, NFL players were tougher back then. Maybe tougher you can replace with stupider and riskier, because obviously now, there are reasons we don't do things for health, science reasons. But Both Dan Pastorini, the Oilers starting quarterback, and Ken Anderson, the Bengals starting quarterback, don't start the game because they're dealing with various injuries they've dealt with throughout the season. But even though they didn't start the game, both of them would come into the game in the second half. Both because I guess they wanted their team to win, and also because they're starting the backups who started for them played so horribly that both of them needed to come in to try to win the game for their team. So the Bengals started a guy named John Reeves, who goes 5 of 13 for 69 yards and 2 interceptions, and the John Hadel, who made a name for himself as the Chargers quarterback. He was one of the better quarterbacks in the AFL, in the American Football League, in the 10 years it existed for the Chargers. He goes 5 of 10 for the Oilers. And I'm just going to throw that number at you, 5 of 10. How many yards do you think he threw for? Completed 5 passes for 5 of 10 passes.
I'm going to go with 180 passing yards and 5 passes.
That's a good guess.
Uh-huh.
But he only threw for 17 yards.
Oh, my gosh.
And he completed 5 passes, attempted 10 for only 17 yards. Obviously, he didn't throw a touchdown, but he did throw 1 interception. But, yeah, these guys played so bad that their hobbled, hurt, better counterparts had to come into the game and try to rescue it for him. That being said, it was still a close game up until the very end. It was 10-10 at the end of the game. The game goes into overtime, and the Bengals win it 13-10 with a 22-yard field goal. So an absolutely crazy game that the Houston Oilers were involved in. And again, like at this point of the year, both of these teams ended up missing the playoffs. But if there was an expanded regular season or an expanded postseason, I think both of them would have had a decent shot at it. But coming into the game, the Bengals were 2-4, and later finished 8-6. So they started 2-4 and ended up with a winning record. And this game kind of saved them, I think.
So I've given Nathaniel 24 hours to think about it. Houston Oilers or Detroit Lions? Who advances, Nate?
Well, you never gave me your Lions. Why the Lions were good? I mean, I think the answer is gonna probably be the same team regardless, but I would like to hear what you have to say about the Lions if you want to share it.
Man, well, I'm going to be honest with you. I want to sandbag them so hard because I'm a Houston Texans fan. Even though the Oilers are the Titans, I still claim ownership over them. I want this team to advance as far as possible, so I'm going to sandbag the Lions. But the stats don't lie. They had a worse record on the season. And you look at the advanced statistics, offensively and defensively, the Detroit Lions rated below average. The Oilers rated above average, and also they just had a plain better quarterback. Dan Pastorini was a damn good quarterback. The Detroit Lions had a quarterback that I can't even tell you. So that's my strong case that I'm absolutely not sandbagging on the Detroit Lions. Is there anything you want to clean up on with them?
Yeah, no, I mean, nothing really to write away about the Lions. They did have a quarterback named Greg Landry, who, at least in Lions terms, I mean, they don't have a lot to be proud of.
He was a top 10 Lions quarterback of all time?
Yeah, top 10, probably like top 6, honestly, top 5.
That's insane. That's sad.
I mean, you think Matthew Stafford, Bobby Lane back in the 1950s. That's about it. Jared Goff is probably already up there, and Greg Landry might be like right down there.
I'm going to Google this and figure out what the answer is, because there's probably like at least 2 quarterbacks we've never heard of at any point from 1905 to 1960.
Yeah.
But you nailed the top 2. I mean, Matt Stafford, Bobby Lane. Who keep making the case but while I load up this list.
Sure. I know Scott Mitchell threw for a lot of yards in the 90s just because the offenses he played on were just so dynamic, but he wasn't really good. I mean, he did lead them to the playoffs, which in terms, like, we're talking relatively for Lions stuff here. Like, that's pretty darn good if you lead a team to the playoffs, because John Kitna never did that. Charlie Batch actually did do that in the late 90s one time. Joey Harrington never did that, right? So they've had just so many horrible quarterbacks throughout their history. But Greg Landry probably like top five or like right outside the top five of all time Lions quarterbacks, which, like you said, is pretty sad because looking at this season for them, it's not a good one.
Dude, okay, this was so hard to find because the internet is just absolute shit. Like, the first 7 Google search results did not provide a top 10. I didn't want to rely on AI. I had to keep on searching. I found the Lions report. And the worst thing about this website is it's a slideshow. So you have to go from one to one, but I'm so desperate to get a real Detroit Lions perspective. Stafford and Lane are 1 and 2. Scott Mitchell is 3. I'm so impressed at how well you know your Detroit Lions history. This fan ranks Greg Landry as the 4th best quarterback in Detroit Lions history.
Nice.
This came out in 2024.
Nice. Well, yeah, good for Greg Landry. Definitely my second favorite Landry in NFL history. I think, he deserves his flowers a little bit. But yesterday, or whenever, I mean, when we're recording this, it doesn't matter when anything actually happened. But we took a slight break. Obviously, that 24-hour thing you mentioned. I don't know where my connection cut off, and I don't know if I got to explain 2 games in the Oilers 1977 season that I thought were really hilarious that I wanted to bring up. I guess I can save them for the next round because I'm definitely going to pick the Oilers here, sorry. But I can bring up those games now or hope that maybe I'll get them in the next round. How do you feel?
I say go 1 and 1. Let's do 1 and then we'll tease the other one. I think it made the original cut, but I think you've built it up in a way that I want to do these stories here. So pick the one that you think is the least interesting of the 2, and we're going to save the more interesting one for later in the podcast.
Sure. So I'll start with the one that was first in the season and is probably not as interesting. So this will make you definitely need to tune in for the later rounds of this. This is when they play the Packers early in the year in Week 2. Both of them are 1-0 after Week 1. The Green Bay Packers obviously finished 4-10, so they're terrible. But at this point of the year, they're pretty solid. They're thinking that they still have some chances to actually be good. They're playing at home. They're playing against the Oilers. Who the heck are the Oilers, right? They definitely got a shot here. It's a slow and sluggish game, kind of what we see in a lot of 1977 for all of the NFL teams. The game is actually tied 10-10 late in the contest. And the Oilers, they've committed 3 turnovers at this point. The Packers, that is. The Packers have committed 3 turnovers at this point. They've been absolutely, outplayed by the Oilers, but they're still in it. The game is still tied. Even though they're at home, they're underdogs to the Houston Oilers. But the Lynn Dickey, the Packers quarterback here, has them driving. He leads them into the red zone. He leads them in scoring opportunity. There's 30 to 40 seconds left in the game. Honestly, all the Packers probably should have done was kneeled the ball down and called a late timeout and then kicked a field goal and won the game. But instead, something ridiculous happens because on one of the final plays of the game, with less than a minute remaining, like I said, Lynn Dickey scrambles out to the right and he throws a pass for one of his receivers, but it's tipped up in the air and then intercepted by Willie Alexander of the Oilers, who takes it 95 yards all the way to the end zone and scores. And the Houston Oilers win the game 16-10, absolutely sending the Packers into oblivion. They can't believe it. And one of the funniest ends to an NFL game, I think, quite honestly ever. But it's brushed under the rug because no real superstars in this game and no playoff significance. And it happened in 1977, right? So who actually cares that this happened? But to me, one of the funnier ends to a game I've ever seen.
Well, dude, they for sure thought they were going to win. They crossed into field goal range, and they were just we're going to win. It's a foregone conclusion. So whenever you do that pick six, it completely subverts your reality. And I think you can make the case that in week 2, losing like that has to absolutely murder the soul of a team. Like, at that point, you could say the Packers season is over, because if you lose a game like that, that honestly is a nice little story to remind people that the Packers didn't always have their shit together. Like it's not the Packers of Brett Favre or Jordan Love or Aaron Rodgers. This was a team that was kind of in a crazy transition post Bart Starr, now coach.